So we are going to finish this up by doing 6, 9, and 10. The reason I'm doing these three together is because they all have to do with finding parts that we need to graph. So this, by the way, on number 6 should say y equals x squared minus 7x plus 6. On number 9, when we solve this problem using the quadratic formula and it equals 0, does anybody know what we're finding when we do this? What part of a graph am I finding? I'm finding my x-intercepts. So you might put a little note on there that says, that tells you x-intercepts. And then the last part on number 10 is graphing it, and we can talk about what the y-intercept is, but it's a pretty quick process.
Why does it say the y? What is that y?
I wrote it in. I wrote in that y equals.
Why?
Because I didn't get it in there when I made the copies.
So it has to be there?
Yes. Okay. So, on finding the vertex, anybody remember what the vertex formula is? X equals negative b over 2a. That negative in the formula is very, very important. So, my b, so when I'm actually finding this, x equals negative, and then what is my b value? So I need to put in parentheses negative 7, and then all divided by 2a, and what is a? 1. Okay, so if I have a double negative 7, what is that? Positive. And then 2 times 1 is just 2. So 7 divided by 2, 3.5. This is also a step that a lot of people did not remember on your test. A lot of people found the x value for the vertex, did not continue to find the y value. Your vertex is a point on a graph, so it has to have both an x and a y value. So once you find the x value, once you know what x is, what do you do with it to find y? Plug it into your original equation. So y equals 3.5 squared minus 7 times 3.5 plus 6. Thank you. So, as I simplify this, 3.5 squared is 12.25. Negative 7 times 3.5 is negative 24.5. And then I drop down that plus 6. And then I'm just going to put that together. So 12.25 minus 24.5 plus 6, so negative 6.25. So my vertex is negative 3.5 for x. Not negative, sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. 3.5 and negative 6.25. So that's my vertex. 6, 9, and 10 are all using the same quadratic equation. So I'm going to go ahead and graph my vertex on number 10. So 3.5, I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, and then halfway. That's my x value. And then negative 6.25, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then a little bit below that, not too far, because it's just a quarter of the way. But it's just going to be an approximation, but I need to specify that point. And then we're going to go up to number 9 and find the x-intercepts using the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. One of the things that I would recommend that you do anytime you're plugging in any of those numbers is to plug them in parentheses. So on this one, our a value is 1, b value is negative 7, and c value is 6. Always watch. Yeah, we did it on the left. Always make sure to watch your negatives with this. So, I plug everything in. Negative is part of the formula, so I'm going to have a negative 7, plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times 6, all divided by 2 times 1. Alright, now I just need to simplify. That double negative 7 becomes positive 7, plus or minus. What's negative 7 squared? 49. Always positive. Keep in mind, anything squared is going to come out positive, so don't let your calculator be smarter than you. If you square negative 7 and it gives you a negative down here, you put it in wrong. Make sure that you're putting it in parentheses so that you don't end up with negative 49 here. This is a positive 49 because a negative times a negative, always positive. And then negative 4 times 1 times 6 is negative 24, all divided by 2 times 1, which is just 2. What do I want to simplify next? What's 49 minus 24? So I've got 7 plus or minus the square root of 25 divided by 2. And what is the square root of 25? 5. So 7 plus or minus 5 divided by 2. One of the common mistakes I saw last time was either just removing the square root without taking the square root, or leaving the square root sign there once you've taken it. So it's like anything else with from one step to the next. If I use it, then I don't need to rewrite it. If I don't use it, then I need to rewrite it. If I've used the square root sign to take the square root to get 5, I don't need the square root sign anymore. I took the square root, it's gone. But you have to use it in order to get rid of it. So, what do I do now? I'm as simplified as I can get. Now I need to split it. So 7 plus 5 divided by 2, which gives me 12 over 2, which is, so that's one of my x-intercepts. So 7 minus 5, whoops, not 75. 7 minus 5 divided by 2 gives me 2 over 2, which is 1. So, that tells me my x-intercept. I'm going to pause before we graph that. So, I just found the x-intercept. So, if I look at my graph, I'll come back to it. If I look at my graph, this right here is my x-axis. That's where I'm going to plot my x-intercepts. So my x-intercepts were at 1, 1, 0, and 6, 0. I did not have a question finding the y-intercept because it's a pretty basic process. What do you plug in for x for the y-intercept? 0. So if I put in 0 for x here and 0 for x here, what am I left with? Just the 6. So when you're in a quadratic, when you're in standard form, the number hanging out here with no x's, that's your y-intercept. So I can just graph the point 0, 6 for my y-intercept. got to be careful. Because a lot of people, this is basically your check on whether or not you made a mistake finding something. So when you connect your points, you should have that general shape. Okay, so when you connect your points, it should have this shape. It should have that V, kind of curved V shape. If it doesn't, like if you've got a y-intercept that's way down here and you have to go up and down and up, then something is wrong. So it's really important that it comes together like this. Your vertex should be halfway between your y-intercepts. So you should have that general shape, and so you want to check carefully if you don't, if you've made any mistakes. Most commonly, those mistakes were probably either finding your X-intercepts or your vertex, and it was probably a negative. Probably a negative that threw off your numbers. So that's the first thing I would check if you're not creating this nice little V shape. So those are the things that you need to be able to do on your final. For some of you, those are things that you need to retake anyway. So I'm going to give you another review that looks extremely similar to this. I would try to do as much of it as you can without referring to this review. But some of the things that you might want to put on your one page of notes that you're going to be allowed are not just an example problem for finding the vertex, but how you actually find it. Like your vertex formula, and then once you get that x value, you plug it into your original equation to get your y value. Things like that that you might forget when you're taking your test. For your finding your y-intercept to graph it, that you plug 0 in for x. Those kind of things are the things that people tend to forget when they're taking their test. Any questions? Alrighty.